Well, hello, good people, and welcome once again to my channel where I seek to provide Oracle-related content for your personal and professional development. And if you certainly like this channel helpful, please go ahead, like our videos, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications so that you can stay informed of when we release new content. So we're going to continue with our multi-part series on configuring a RAC cluster and eventually a RAC database. In the first video, we did prepare our Oracle Virtual Linux 7 server with 3 network interfaces. So this second video will focus a little bit on some things we need to do as we clone this VM. So we are kind of duplicating that server. That way we have 2 servers, because our intention, of course, is to create a 2-node rack. So the video today would be heavily focused on how to clone that VM. But before we do that, there are some preliminary settings that we are going to do. And then eventually we're going to configure the hostname and network so that these VMs should be identified separately. So before we do that, let's double check here on our VirtualBox manager to see. So we have our RAC node 1 VM that is currently running. And I would go ahead and open up a session for our RAC node 1. Now, if you remember, this is the IP address we gave to our RAC node 1, 192.168.56.111. So let's go ahead and open up a session. And I would go ahead and increase our real estate here a little bit. So I have a document that I'm using as a guideline. Now, before we do that, like I said, there is some pre-work that we need to do. So because we are going to be using ASM, we need to start configuring some of the utilities that we need in order to be able to successfully run ASM. So I would go ahead and install and configure the ASM packages. Typically, I would always check, first of all, to send a ping, because these YUM packages are, of course, online. I would send a ping to yahoo.com and making sure that we still have connectivity with the internet. All right, so that shows that this is good. So I would go ahead and install the first package, which would be our kernel module package for our ASM libraries. So this shouldn't take too much time. And then, of course, I would go ahead and install our Oracle ASM support, or our YUM install Oracle ASM star. Now, star is a wildcard. So I would use the wildcard just to pick ASM support, and if there is anything else within that package that would need to be installed as well. And the reason I'm doing this right now is so that when I clone the VM, this package is already installed on them. So I don't need to rerun these installations on the second server. This seems to be taking a little longer, but we'll just be patient and wait. All right, finally completed. All right, that took a sweet amount of time. Let's copy our ASM library package. This one for sure doesn't take too long. So that completed really quickly. NTP is for network time protocol. We need this just to make sure it's there. We would enable cronid so that it kind of synchronizes our time between our two servers. Let's install our bind. This one also seems to take a sweet amount of time, but let's let it do its thing. Now, while that is being done, oh, it's encountering a broken, so I might have to use the skip broken, but that's okay. I think we should be good for now. All right, so because we are planning on running our Oracle 12c installation, now the reason, like I said, I'm installing this before cloning the VM is I don't want to install this on one server and then eventually if I don't install it right now, I will have to install it after I clone. So I just want to make sure that we do all of this on this server and then clone it that way. All right, so already installed and latest version, so there's nothing to do. That looks good. Now we would run the sysctl -p to see what kernel parameters we have that have been changed. So these are some of the changes that were affected by our pre-installed package. Now, one of the things when I explained in my first video was firewall. I think we disabled firewall, but I'm just going to check the status of firewall just to make sure that it is effectively disabled. So we don't want that. And if it was enabled, then we would disable it. So we would stop it and disable it. So let's make sure that we look at our cronid and see, let's check the status first of all of our cronid. Let's check the status of our cronid status. It's disabled. So I would want us to enable that service because we certainly are going to need it. Let's do a restart of that service. Let's do a restart of that service. And let's make some changes to it as well. Okay, that looks good. And then I think I need to see that as well. 200, that is good. Now, at this point, we've installed a bunch of stuff, right? And this may be optional for you if you want to. I typically like running a yum update just to keep all my packages up to date. But the tendency is this is going to take a fairly good amount of time. So in the interest of the video, once this starts running, I would pause the video and resume the video when yum has been updated, when our yum packages have been updated completely. So I'm pausing right now, and you could just go ahead and, you know, if you're following this, you could also wait until your yum packages have all been updated, and then we proceed. All right, guys, so we're back. So the yum update kind of took its sweet time. And if you were following along with me, you probably would notice that it took quite a bit of time. So now that we are done with our yum update, let's go ahead and see. Remember the Oracle pre-install package that we did, installed some user groups and actually installed the Oracle user. So let's see within our database what groups were installed. So let's grab those typically are in the 543 group. So it installed Oracle as the user as part of the O install group. So it also installed the DBA, Opera, Backup DBA, DataGuard DBA, KM DBA. This is used for security. RAC DBA, ASM DBA, ASM Oper, and ASM admin. Now, if for some reason any of these groups was not installed, you probably would need to install that yourself. So you could just use the group add. These commands right here would install the ASM DBA, ASM Oper, and ASM admin. Also, in most videos and documentations that I've seen, usually the grid installation is done with the user Oracle. But I would like to make this video a little different and use grid as the user who owns the installation of the grid infrastructure. So I had already installed the grid user, but I would open this up a little bit for you guys so that you would see if you had to add the grid user, this is the command you would use. This is the command you would use. So you would go with a user add -G. This would be the main group to which the grid user is going. And then subgroups would be ASM admin, ASM DBA, ASM Oper, RAC, DBA, and the DBA group itself. But because I had already installed this user, let me just go ahead and see what this user has. So the user here, grid, is also part of the O install, the group ID, and also belongs to RAC DBA, ASM DBA, ASM Oper, ASM admin. Now I want this user also to be part of the DBA group. So rather than doing a user add, there is also a command called the user mod. So user mod would modify the permissions on that user. So let's go ahead and do that. But again, like I said, if you hadn't installed this user, you would use this command. I'm just going to modify this to user mod to make sure that I have all the groups. I wanted to add the DBA group. So O install would be the primary group, and then ASM, ASM Oper, ASM admin. But I am adding the DBA group to this user. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Now, if I do ID grid now would have DBA as well as the grid user is going to be part of the DBA group. Now, password, let's do password changes. Let's do password change for Oracle. Tokens updated successfully. Let's do the password for grid. I would use the password, same password, Oracle. So tokens updated successfully. Now I would create directories in which the grid software will be installed. So I want to make this directory, copy, make directory that. I would copy and make the grid. This is going to be used for the grid base, just as much as we use Oracle base. This would be the foundation of the grid installation. I would also create this folder, Oracle. I would change the ownership of U01 to grid for now. And I would change the ownership of U01 app Oracle. I would change it to Oracle. And then I would change the permissions on U01 to 775. All right, that looks good for now. So at this point, we would shut down our VM and clone it. So I would use an init 0 to shut down this VM. So let's give it a minute. VM certainly shouldn't take too much time to clone, maybe a minute. Let's just confirm here that it's shutting down. And when this eventually disappears, then that VM would have been shut down successfully. Okay, so it looks like it shut down successfully. So let's go over to our VirtualBox manager. So right now, we have this here. Now, one thing I would like you to do, and anyway, don't bother. We're still going to clone it anyway. So we would clone this. And in the clone, I would not leave the name as RAC node 1 because I'm cloning it into a new server called RAC node 2, which would be the second node of our RAC system. And one of the things you need to make sure that you do are the MAC address policy. Now, MAC addresses are physical addresses of the network adapter. So you want to make sure that you generate new MAC addresses for all the networks. Now, if you were exporting this to use it on another computer, then you don't need to do that. But because we are going to be using this on this computer and we would have both nodes running concurrently, we need to generate new MAC addresses for them. So let's go ahead and click next. We're going to do a full clone. And hopefully this should take about a minute. It says 15 seconds, 20 something seconds. It's probably going to take maybe a minute plus or minus. And if we're lucky, it takes a lot faster. It looks like it's going to finish quickly. That's good. All right, so we have successfully cloned. So what we are going to do right now would be to open up RAC node 2. Now, remember, the same network configuration settings in terms of IP address and host name are going to be the same as RAC node 1. So we are going to log in into this server as if we are logging into RAC node 1, and I would show you once we get there. Now, while we are in there, we're going to make some changes so that we can now assign its own unique IP address and use that to log on to it subsequently. And certainly, it's going to have its own host name as well. All right, I think we are up and running. So like I said, we are still going to log into it using the 111 IP address. So if I, open up another session and rerun this 111, we should have the same VM opened up here right now. So host name CTL would give us what this VM is at this point. Now we are going to use the host name, the NMCLI command to generate a new host name for this server. So I'm going to copy this NMCLI general host name. I'm changing it from RAC node 1 to RAC node 2. And we can also double check that, of course, by rerunning our hostname CTL. So right now it's changed to RAC node 2. Now, but the IP address is the same. So we are going to have to make a change to that as well. It says here reboot, but before I reboot, I would want to make sure that I go into the network scripts file that's in the etc or that's in the etc sysconfig location, and then make some changes to the network interface files. So let's cd into that location. And then I would run an ls-l. And this, if IFCFG files are basically, especially for the ENP0S8 and ENP0S3, these are two files that I am going to change. So I would VI into the first one, which is this one, the ENP-S03. Now, before I do that, I want to cut the contents of my etc hosts file so that we all can see the IP address we are changing to. So for node 2, we are going to change from 111 to 112. and we are going to change from 10.101 to 10.102, just to give you perspective. So let's VI into the IF config file 3. Now this, if you look down here, there is an entry for the IP address. We are going to take it to the end and change 1 to 2, and we save that. And then we are going to do the same for the IFCFG file 8. And we are going to change that, of course, switch to insert mode, and then I change it to 2. So that would be it for our network IPs. So at this point, it is safe for me to boot these machines up and see exactly, let me shut it down, and then I can restart it, but I want to shut it down first, so that I eventually will launch both machines and see exactly what their IP addresses are. So that one is powered off. Let's open up RAC node 1. While that is running, I'm also going to open up RAC node 2 and make sure that both of them are starting. So RAC node 1, I'm just going to make sure I put this on this side. Where's RAC node 2? I put it on this side, and then I put RAC node 1 on this side. That way, we can look at the IP addresses and confirm that both servers now have separate unique IP addresses. And if all goes well, certainly that would be the end of our cloning exercise. And we would move over to the next video, where we would actually be preparing these servers for ASM configuration. So we would allocate disks for ASM. So both servers seem to be up and running. So first, I would go in here as the user root, Oracle, and I would also log in here as the root user, Oracle. So I'm doing this side by side so that I show you guys exactly that the IP addresses are different. This one keeps coming back. Okay. All right, so this, remember, RAC node 1, and this is RAC node 2. I would right click and open up a terminal in here. I right click also and open up a terminal in here. So if we run our host name CTL, we have RAC node 1. We run the same host name CTL. We have RAC node 2. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. And also, if we run our host name -i, that gives us 111, host name -i, that gives us 112. Similarly, we can run an if config, an if config, and if config says enp0s3. Let me run that this way too, so that we are comparing them concurrently. So it says right here, ENP0S3 is now 112, ENP0S3 is 111, ENP0S8 is 10101, ENP0S8 is 10102. So we have eventually cloned our VM in the way that we want, so that they have two separate static IPs. Now let's try connecting to this from our mobile extend. Now I already have a connection session setting. So that would be 112 for root. Let's first of all Let me close this one up and let's connect 111 first. 111 is live. And then let's connect 112. 112 is live. So we are able to establish our connections in this video. I'll leave it at this point and then stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.